Hello everybody, and thank you so much for clicking onto this video. We're going to get to the video in just a second, but I have a special announcement. We have a new sponsor, actually our first official sponsor for the YouTube channel, which is Yamashita Tokei. Right now, what Yamashita Tokei is focusing on is rare collectibles and limited edition models of G-Shock watches. So I have my G-Shock watch. If you're interested and you want to support this channel, go to this link, yamashitatokei.com, and buy yourself a watch. Okay, now to the video. In the hands of an expert, the timbre of the shakuhachi may range from a sound as clear and frivolous as the tinkling of a metal bell to passionate, breathy tones that seem to contain the sounds of the universe. Katsuya Yokoyama. Welcome back everyone for the next installment of Japanese music theory, Shomyo to Shakuhachi. So far we have discussed the different types of scales, pitches, and the three disciplines at hand, Shomyo, Hitoyogiri, and Shakuhachi. Now we can look at what connects these art forms together, and there is no better place to begin than with tone and timbre. We will go through and define what tone and timbre is, talk some history, and give some examples. What I hope you walk away with is an understanding of the importance of Japanese timbre in music and how it is an underlying aesthetic quality that can be found in the high arts of Japan. First, let's define our two words of focus, tone and timbre. From the Oxford Dictionary, tone, when referred to in music, the quality of a sound, especially the sound of a musical instrument, or one produced by electronic equipment. Next is timbre, the quality of sound that is produced by a particular voice or musical instrument. In music, tone is particularly speaking about the sound quality in terms of dynamics, pitch, and duration. Timbre, on the other hand, is a little more specific as it relates to the harmonic content of an instrument. Timbre has also been described as tone color or tone quality. As a simple example, shakuhachi and oboe can both play a G4, but the timbre of the oboe separates itself from the shakuhachi. Now we have the difficult job of highlighting the differences in tone and timbre between the Western and Japanese music. So let's ask ourselves, what is Japanese tone color? As a whole, Japanese music does not make a distinction between musical sound and noise. And this is especially true of shakuhachi music. Consequently, the traditional shakuhachi player does not hide the sources of energy of his music, as does the Western flautist. The timbre of the shakuhachi encompasses all shades between the purest and clearest pianissimo imaginable and an explosive release of breath, producing a hissing noise which is completely devoid of anything resembling tone, according to the Western terminology. The beauty of Japanese timbre in traditional music is a captivating aspect of the country's rich cultural heritage. Traditional Japanese music, including genres like Gagaku, no, kabuki, and various forms of traditional folk music, showcases a unique and evocative use of instruments and vocal techniques that create distinctive sonic landscapes. Japanese traditional music also features various vocal techniques, like the many we mentioned in the Shomyo video, as well as contemporary usages like the use of nasally intonation in enka, a popular modern music genre, and the subtle expressiveness of no theater's chant-like vocals. These vocal techniques complement the timbre of the instruments and contribute to the overall beauty of the music. The beauty of Japanese timbre in traditional music is not only about the individual instruments, but also how they are used in combination to create a tapestry of sound that reflects the nuances of Japanese culture, history, and emotions. It is a testament to the deep connection between music and the cultural identity of Japan, offering listeners a window into the country's rich and diverse artistic heritage. Whether it's the gentle melodies of a koto, the dramatic strumming of the shamisen, or the resonant beats of the taiko drums, Japanese traditional music timbre is a mesmerizing journey through sound that captivates and transports its audience. Speaking about timbre on the shakuhachi, Riley Lee notes this in his thesis. In fact, one of the frequently heard criticisms leveled against shakuhachi players by other shakuhachi players is that their tone quality is too flute-like. A student of Yamaguchi Goro said that his teacher taught him that the airy sounds, which a Western flute player would attempt to eliminate entirely as unwanted noise, is essential in the shakuhachi tone. Many of the old manuals for Hitoyogiri and Shakuhachi alike speak heavily about tone, color, and how certain sounds should be more airy or crispy. The manual authors will often describe animals or scenes of nature to help the learner understand the nature of timbre they are trying to accomplish. Genichi Tsuge, famed Japanese musicologist, has said that in Japanese music, there is a deep-seated attitude towards realization of the self-sufficient musical world within the scope of a single tone. Let me give a quick example of the timbre fluctuations that occur on a single note by giving an example from each of our three disciplines. In our first example, we will hear how a multitude of vocal effects in Shomyo change the landscape of the piece. Rather than thinking of melody in terms of pitch changes, creating tension and release, hear how the timbre shifts move us from one type of tension to another. Next, in Hitoyogiri, we hear how different articulations in timbre shift the color of a single note in a traditional work. Lastly, in the Shakuhachi world, we hear a line from the famous Honshirabe, where multiple fingerings are used to produce the same note, with widely different dynamics and timbres. In performing and listening to the shakuhachi, the focus is on the individual tone and the world of sounds created within it, rather than the melodic line. Now, this is not to say that Japanese music has no melodic line or melodic contour. It is in fact riddled with memorable melodic phrases. However, the focus of much of Japanese music is the development of tone and timbre. In comparison with Western music, Nick Bolando and Bruno Deschênes have this to say. Historically, European musicians and philosophers were largely interested in tones that can be formalized into melodies, with tone color generally existing on the periphery of composition. Traditional Japanese music's greater reliance on tone color often requires the presence of a specific instrument, thus lending to greater flexibility to pitch and melody, which is most visible in the case of the shakuhachi. Now that we have established a rudimentary understanding of tone and timbre in Japanese music, let's move on to the historical context and why timbre is so important in the Japanese worldview. Aoki Debo, the late living national treasure of Kinko-ryu shakuhachi, once stated, "Fuke shakuhachi players pursue truth, while Kinko players pursue beauty." It seems that Debo is suggesting that the komuso emphasized tone color more than the modern shakuhachi player. The komuso were more interested in a meditative aesthetic for the sake of religious or philosophical truths, rather than a performance for the purposes of entertainment. The alleged inspiration for the komuso tradition, Fuke Zenji, is discussed in the Hitori Mondo, written by Hisamatsu Fuyo of the Kinko-ryu school. Although the Fuke legend has largely been debunked by scholars, Hisamatsu's insights regarding Kinko versus Fuke playing are quite interesting. Question: what kind of person was Fuke Zenji? Answer: I do not know. Better ask someone with more knowledge of Zen. Question: wasn't Fuke the ancestor of shakuhachi? If one follows this path but doesn't know its origins, is that not a sign of immaturity? Answer: as for myself, because I understand the source of shakuhachi, I say I do not know Fuke. Fuke was an enlightened man, but I do not think he sought his enlightenment by playing shakuhachi. He cannot be compared to an ignorant blind person like me who plays shakuhachi because he enjoys it and has gradually come to know that the shakuhachi is a Zen instrument. Even if Fuke had played shakuhachi, it would only have been a passing fancy. His practice of shakuhachi would not compare to my training for many years. If Fuke were to come alive again in this generation, he would surely become my disciple and ask me to show him the way. If you look at the records from time of Fuke, and if you know all about his life, but you do not know his enlightenment, then you do not know Fuke. On the other hand, a person who knows nothing of his life, but knows his enlightenment, he knows Fuke. I do not know him yet. This doesn't mean that the musicians of the Edo period who were not Fuke loyalists didn't aim to create textures and interesting timbral structures, but the idea of performance was on the minds of the Kinko players. This can be seen in the works adopted into the Kinko school. Some pieces have undergone structural changes in order to fit a more aesthetically pleasing curve to the music. And let us not forget the major changes of the instrument itself. Nick Bolando and Bruno Deschênes comment heavily on this in their article. Construction methods for the shakuhachi have shifted over time along with Japanese cultural values. Almost all shakuhachi made during the Edo era had raw natural bores rather than polished ones. We also spoke about this in the previous video with Shimura Satoshi's comment as well. Back to the quote. They used fingerhole position calculation methods, termed towari or kyuhan wari, divide by 10, or divided by 9.5, where in the spacing between each of the 4 holes on the front of the flute is set a 1/10 or 9.5 of the total length of the flute. The result is ergonomically pleasing, but the notes are not precisely in tune according to a scale or a mode. The assumption is that the tones will be adjusted with the breath according to the player's aim. With these factors in mind, we can look now a little more at the development of timbral sensibility over time. So we established that the shakuhachi music itself wasn't necessarily geared towards performance per se, but was rather an introspective practice according to tradition. This meshes well with the Hitoyogiri and its use as a solo instrument. Although the Hitoyogiri might be used to play folk songs and ensemble music, our focus here is on the classical tunes composed for the Hitoyogiri. As for the sound of the Hitoyogiri, its tone color is like that of the sho. Its fingering similar to that of the hichiriki. The closing off of its mouthpiece is the same as the side-blown flute. Kamiya junte, shichiku kokinshu, Hitoyogiri, and strings, then and now. Kamiya junte notes here the historical connection with other instruments, and the tone color is the first thing that he mentions. In addition to the tone color focus on the Hitoyogiri, there is also a strong connection with nature. Manuals also know that one should play the instrument outside. Let me now switch hats and speak as a performer to address the subjective experience of playing the Hitoyogiri. When playing the Hitoyogiri, I have felt that it is more of a meditative instrument and more connected to Shomyo. This could be due to the simple fact that they share harmonic content in their modes. Or it could be that I experience these feelings because I have been led to believe that Shomyo and Hitoyogiri are historically associated with meditative practice. Here we encounter an epistemological problem regarding the acquisition of knowledge and formations of opinions. While studying the Hitoyogiri, I learned that seasons are associated with the modes. Banshiki is winter, Hyojo is autumn, Sojo is spring, and Oshiki is summer, and the Doyo or Ichikotsu is a neutral season transitional mode. When I hear and perform these melodies, I have vivid imagery of these different seasons, and sometimes I can even feel the cool ocean breeze on a hot summer day when playing Yasuda and Oshiki, or smell the freezing wind coming off snow-covered pines when I listen to or play Shote and Banshiki. Once you recognize these connections, it's difficult to shake them, and it becomes impossible to determine the source of the experiences we have when playing or listening to these pieces. Is there something inherent in the modes that links them to these seasons, or do we perceive the seasonal imagery because we are taught that they are associated? What I would like to try now is simply playing the modes and their netori, the short tuning pieces. Now, a problem is that in this series you have already heard some of the modes and my explanations on them. Try to listen now as I play 3 of the modes that relate to seasons, and it will not include the neutral tuning piece. See if you can tell which mode is by which season. See the comments for the revealed order. Now, taking off my philosophical performer's hat, let's go back to the video and move on to tonal techniques and still a little more philosophy. Even the simplest of techniques on the shakuhachi are related primarily to their tonal and timbral characters. For example, in both Hitoyogiri and shakuhachi, the techniques meri and kari are present. Shimura, in his presentation, Playing Techniques on the Shakuhachi, has this to note on meri and kari. Of the 2 techniques, meri is more fundamental. In the case of kari, different concepts occur. In some school, this term is used to refer to pitch, which is not lowered, or the playing motion necessary to produce such a pitch. At any rate, with these techniques, other effects are also attained, particularly in dynamics and timbre. These dynamics become softer with meri and louder with kari. Furthermore, the timbre is darker with meri and brighter with kari. But the simple sounds and techniques don't stop at the physical actions. Behind them, a philosophical purpose emerges. Japan during much of its history was not only heavily influenced by Buddhism, but also by Taoism through Neo-Confucianism. One of the primary schools of thought was Yomeigaku. The school's founder was Nakae Toju in the 17th century. He was also joined by samurai reformer Kumazawa Banzan. The school had a large following as samurai and gained even more popularity as time went on into the Meiji Restoration. One of the key points of Neo-Confucianism is the supreme ultimate, which is an underlying cosmic principle or ultimate reality that unifies all things. This idea is heavily influenced by Taoism. Another point is the emphasis on harmony with nature. Taoist doctrine encourages individuals to seek harmony with nature and the cosmos. Yin and yang, or yin and yo, represent the dualistic and complementary nature of existence. Riley Lee notes this on Meditative and yin and yang. Yang is the universal force or principle that is light, heat, active, outward, positive, and masculine, corresponding to the kari technique and the tone it produces. Yin and yang are always both contrast and complement each other. Without one, the other one doesn't exist. Together, they form the universe in the broadest sense of the word. The same is considered true of the Meditative techniques and their corresponding tones. Now let's take a listen to the difference between U daimeri, one fingering on the shakuhachi, and Re, another fingering resulting in the same pitch. You can hear the clear color change and difference between the two. One could even argue in hearing the darkness versus brightness between the two, and I personally think that it's a great way of expressing these tone color differences. To keep with this idea of yin and yo, and yin and yang, let's take a look at a technique that bears those titles in regards to tone color, yo kamuri, starting from the meri position and throwing up the note into the kari position, in kamuri, throwing the note down into the meri, and then coiling up to return to the kari position. It is important to remember that timbral and tonal techniques are just a part of the sonic landscape that Japanese music has. The additional sounds in tandem with the shakuhachi or Hitoyogiri's basic tones are considered vitally important. The slight hiss or the roaring wind effects play a huge role in tone color. Sawari in Japanese or noise in English has just as much to do to contribute to musical content of a piece as does pitch and rhythm. There is also the concept of music is being morphed and changed by nature over time through an individual's hands. An individual's tone, soul, and being chips away at the mountain range of pieces called honkyoku. Yokoyama notes this when studying with Watazumi. If you think about it, it must have been that honkyoku pieces morph by nature. If the original composer were to listen to today's version, it would probably make him think, good piece. I wonder whose it is. Sounds kind of like the one I wrote, but maybe not. I don't think honkyoku pieces are something that we intentionally change. Of course, there are some who want to change a piece, going as far as to try this and try that, and so on until they don't want to play it any other way than what they've come up with. Or someone might intend to play the piece as it is, but lack the skill, so that the piece ends up changing even though they never necessarily thought to themselves, this is the only way I can play this part, so I'll just change to fit. This sort of thing happens over several generations, resulting in the piece we have today. Shakuhachi scores are like skeletons, lacking the precision of modern 5-line staff notation. They sprout leaves and branches so that we get pieces like Sanya and Tsuru no Sugomori that have spread throughout Japan, leaving us with a plurality of pieces having identical titles, probably because of the process I just described. Take my own students, for that matter. Even though I teach them in this way, I can almost predict how the piece might change. A piece changes in different ways with different students. Yokoyama Katsuya. But this doesn't mean that we are allowed to change the piece. I know it may seem like I am contradicting Yokoyama, but think of it this way. When we see a great calligraphy, a character may not look like the dictionary entry, but it is still recognizably the kanji or Chinese character. It is the same with honkyoku. Yokoyama continues and clarifies later in the article. I don't think that we should feel free to insert our own ideas into traditional pieces. It's enough if we just play up to the point that this is the only way I can play it. Knead it, work it, study it until you've got to a point where that's just how you have to play it. I think that this is what constitutes honkyoku. That's why the fundamental idea is not to have a mindset when you fiddle with a piece, changing it here and there to make it sound cool. Even so, these pieces morph over time. This is one of the keys of tone and timbre in my estimation. Honkyoku wa honnin no kyoku. Honkyoku. It's your piece. These famous words by Yokoyama resonate so deeply with those practitioners of shakuhachi. With much of the score not clearly depicted, decisions have to be made. Color palettes need to be laid out, for the canvas that we work on is vast, and we are only given a few pencil markings for a magnum opus. Personal reflection and discussion. Many of the times we can find ourselves dry and stale when it comes to making an academic presentation of subjective topics like this one. So I reached out to a few of my Japanese music friends and got some of their personal reflections on tone and timbre and their role in Japanese music. But first, a quote from famed Japanese composer Toru Takemitsu. Japanese instruments, for example the biwa and the shakuhachi, produce sounds that are very vivid and near to man. The moment I hear one of these sounds, I see a whole world before me. This is music for me. When I hold such an instrument in my hands and play it, I am nearer to the essence of music than when I compose something new for this instrument. On the other hand, the sound of European instruments is already very abstract, removed from nature. The two categories of sounds belong to different worlds. Kyle Abbott, shamisen performer and maker and founder of the Waves of Harmony, notes this. The shamisen has quite a few such unique qualities within the instrument. Fundamentally, its most alluring quality is the ability to get a real percussion from the large plectrum, bachi, striking against the skin, while simultaneously creating melody from the strings. Furthermore, when the shamisen is properly set up, a whole world of subtle flavors emerge. The shamisen's most unique characteristic is a buzzing drone effect called sawari, and when the shamisen is set up correctly, that buzzing drone will warmly resonate across all three strings when you press specific positions on the strings. As well as this, a wide range of percussive and tonal dynamics can be achieved with the bachi by changing the striking angle and level of force. Bruno Deschênes, shakuhachi player and researcher, reflects the following. As all shakuhachi players discover early on in learning this bamboo flute, the most grueling tone to play is tsumeri. It can take months and even years to properly play a beautiful tsumeri that has a nice quality of tone color. A lot can be said on how to technically produce that tone. One thing I never heard or read about is learning how to make a beautiful tsumeri, in other words, giving it a beautiful tone color. From experience, this is not done through working only on the technical aspects of playing this tone, but as well as when we listen to its tone color. It is, I would suggest, our listening to what we play that determines the quality of that tone, as well as all other tones. This point came to me when Kurohashi Yodo from Kyoto told me during a lesson a few years ago that Japanese 20th century master Yamaguchi Goro told him a while ago during a lesson that he had with him that playing the shakuhachi is not about playing in tune, but about making beautiful tones. In solo, playing in tune does not have to be assumed, but making beautiful tones should be. Jonin, a mendicant priest in Japan, reflected this when I asked him to comment on the tone color in shakuhachi. I was told the ideal sound of shakuhachi is that of the wind blowing through bamboo. I spent a lot of time in bamboo groves, and I don't hear players reaching that level. The sound is chaotic, disjointed, and rolls like waves. The bamboo will accompany the rush of wind with cracks and pops as if you were on an ancient wooden ship in rough seas. LeRon Harrison, Gagaku musician and independent scholar, notes this on hichiriki, shol, and ryuteki, along with a little note on shakuhachi. The hichiriki has the lowest range of the three wind instruments of Gagaku, G3 to A4. Although with the embai, the glissandos, the range could be extended out to F3 to B4. This range sits within the range of the tenor voice, and as such, the Hitoyogiri accompanies the singing voice in the vocal music. The imagery used to describe the three instruments depicts the hichiriki as the voice of man, sounding out to the heavens, the shol as the light from the heaven shining down, and the ryuteki as the cries of the dragon flying between heaven and earth. The hichiriki usually plays the pitches that the singer sing in vocal music. It either accompanies them or plays the opposite range when the vocalist goes low or high outside of the range to let the voice be in the foreground. If the subject matter is Japanese tone and timbre, the timbre of hichiriki and the other instruments of Gagaku cannot be treated as it has been until now, given a moment to be discussed and then brushed off to the side as if it had or has no impact or relation to the other forms of Japanese music after an imagined age of decline wherein the music was sealed off from the public. When you see mention of Oshiki and Banshiki in the treaties of Zeami, there is a connection between Gagaku and No that has yet to be understood. When the Shakuhachi images in the Taigen show depict similar tonal setups as the instrument has now, you cannot say that Gagaku has no impact on Shakuhachi after the 10th century. When you hear a gaku and a koto piece, another moment of Gagaku influence on the other music is staring you in the face and sounding out in the strings. These connections need to be mentioned and presented if you want an accurate and sensitive discussion of what Japanese tone and timbre is. Professor of Texas A&M University, Marty Reagan, states this: among the various musical parameters, it is timbre rather than melody, harmony, or rhythm that one can immediately perceive in a powerfully visceral way. Whether it is the rustic, earthy, breath-like timbres of the shakuhachi, the buzzing and rattling of the biwa, the raspiness of the hichiriki, or the elegant plucking of the koto when ivory picks meet silk strings, traditional Japanese instruments and their unique timbres can transport a listener beyond space and time in a moment. In traditional Japanese music, one finds countless examples of what may be considered noise from the perspective of the Western aesthetics. This noise aesthetic reflects the idea of imperfection, asymmetry, and the ingenious integrity of natural processes that are found throughout many forms of Japanese cultural expressions. The range of timbral nuances that are possible with traditional Japanese instruments instills a certain mystical depth and richness which is simply unparalleled. Conclusion. Today we discussed the topic of tone and timbre of Japanese music. We defined our terms, looked at some history, talked some philosophy, and heard examples with each of our 3 focus disciplines. Then we topped it off with professional musicians giving their insights on Japanese timbre. Alright, so let's wrap up the video on Japanese tone color. I hope you enjoyed this exploration into a fascinating aspect of Japanese music. In conclusion, Japanese timbre and tone color is multifaceted, culturally rich topic that extends far beyond the visible spectrum of light. It permeates each and every note, offering a unique and nuanced perspective on the world. I hope this video has provided you with a deeper understanding of this captivating aspect of Japanese culture. If you found this video informative and engaging, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content on Japanese music. And as always, if you have any questions or thoughts to share, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. I love hearing from you, and your feedback inspires me to create more content like this. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of Japanese tone color, and I look forward to seeing you in our next video adventure.